Everyone, and welcome to our talk, Is It Worth It? Putting patient voice at the heart of health tech testing. And we're delighted to be sharing this work as part of Digital Leaders Week 2024. Today, we're going to cover why we believe a new approach is needed in health tech before sharing a case study of our work with Asthma Lung UK on their Innovation Accelerator programme. And finally, we'll share the impact of that project and how we hope to have value more broadly across the health tech space. Just to introduce ourselves, first of all, I'm Jenny. I'm the founder and director of Humanly. My background's in design, and I've been working in design for social impact for the past 13 years or so.
And I'm Ali. I'm head of social innovation at Humanly. I've got a background in art and education. I've been working in human-centered design and social innovation since 2015. So I'm going to talk you through why a new approach was needed in the area of health tech. So the challenge itself in terms of respiratory health is that 1 in 5 people in the UK will experience a lung condition, and the majority of these will have a chronic condition, so a condition that lasts for years or even decades. When it comes to lung conditions, self-management is really important. People don't necessarily have a huge amount of contact with their GPs. They might have one annual visit with a GP, and that's versus the 365 days a year that they can be using self-management. Good self-management is key to keeping people healthy and out of hospital. And obviously, there are huge potential cost savings to the health service when people are able to keep themselves well and out of hospital. In other areas of health, self-management technologies have really transformed people's care, especially, for example, with diabetes. However, that has not been the same for people with lung conditions. The same has not been seen at all. So the problem is not a lack of self-management tools. In fact, there are hundreds of apps, devices and products that have been developed to encourage and support self-management for people with lung conditions. Problem is that none of these have yet to be widely adopted or used at scale. Many of them are not developed or tested with target users, hence are not fit for purpose. The Asthma Lung UK Innovation Accelerator was conceived to address exactly this challenge. So, having identified that the problem is not a lack of self-management products, but rather that none of these products have gained traction amongst people living with lung conditions, the accelerator focused heavily on the user experience and desirability of products for end users. It aimed to identify new early stage technologies that people want to use and to deliver a programme of user experience testing and feedback to improve the products, aiming to increase the potential for real world impact. The theme of moving more was selected to focus efforts and ensure the programme addressed a true unmet need. And now I'm going to pass over to Jenny to talk you through the process.
Thanks, Ali. So yeah, at the beginning of the Innovation Accelerator, we were brought in to work closely with Asthma Lung UK to design and deliver the programme. And our role was really to make sure that people with lived experience of living with a lung condition were meaningfully involved in all aspects of the programme. So both in terms of testing the health tech that was selected to go through the programme, but also in the co-design of the whole process itself. And if you're not familiar with Humanly, we're a team of human-centered designers. We've got lots of experience in the health space, and we also worked alongside our associate Rupert Tebb, who brought lots of great experience developing apps with the NHS. But we didn't want to go any further before bringing people with lived experience into our team. So we developed a co-design team made up of myself and Ali from Humanly, 3 people from Asthma Lung UK's research and innovation team, and 5 people with a really diverse range of backgrounds living with lung conditions. And they were really on board as equal partners and decision makers through the whole process. We really wanted to make sure we had a 50-50 split in the co-design team of professionals and people with lived experience. And this made a real difference to the conversations we had and all the different perspectives that were part of the team. And during the course of the project, we did have a staff member move on to another role, and a co-designer with lived experience had to drop out due to a family bereavement. But we maintained that 50-50 balance of perspectives on the team. And I think that was really key to the success of the co-design process. We also worked together throughout every stage of the project. So right from the beginning, when we selected the theme and put out our open call for innovations that help people with lung conditions to move more, all the way through to testing out those innovations, analysing the results and capturing the learning. So I won't go through all the details of how we work together now, but we'll share some of the key stages in the next slides. Going back to the beginning, the most important thing in the first stages were to really build relationships in the team. And this quote from Katie McKercher's book, Beyond Sticky Notes, was really something that we held close to our hearts at the beginning. It was really this concept of, if you don't have time to build relationships, you don't have time for co-design. And that's something that we really challenged ourselves to step out of our comfort zone and just really slow down and spend the first few weeks of the project doing just that. So the first thing we did was we had one-to-one introduction calls with our co-designers with lung conditions, so we could tell them more about what we were setting out to do, answer questions, get to know everyone as individuals. And then we got together as a whole team for the first time in person. We selected a really nice venue to try and put people at ease. We didn't want it to feel stuffy or corporate. So we met at the Midlands Arts Centre in Birmingham, and we booked this beautiful room with lots of natural light, views of the park. We were lucky with the weather as well. So that really created a nice atmosphere as we came together to start building relationships and build a shared understanding of what we were setting out to do. I think other things that were really key about this first gathering were just taking the time to have a long lunch break and keeping it really informal. So instead of booking catering to the room, we just went down to the cafe, spent a good couple of hours just having lunch, chatting, and really building a deeper understanding of who everyone was and what they brought to the project. And we also carried out quite a few interactive activities. For example, we had a really rich discussion about what co-design means to each of us, and we identified our hopes and fears for the project so that we built a common understanding of what success would look like. And that was something we were able to revisit at the end to see if we had achieved our aims. Our next challenge, however, was to make the transition to meeting online. Because one thing we decided early on was to recruit people for our co-design team from different parts of the country. So we were quite geographically spread out, and it just made much more sense for the majority of our meetings to be online. However, we had created this amazing atmosphere of collaboration, fun, taking really good care of everyone's needs, making sure everybody was fed and comfortable. And, you know, it was a real challenge to think how we're going to keep all of that great stuff going in an online space. And we're quite a big team as well. So we went into this new space, not entirely sure how that would work out. However, the transition was actually quite smooth, and we were really pleasantly surprised. And I think this was a real testament to how well we had got to know each other and built those relationships in person before kicking off the sort of real work, if you like. Our meetings were generally once a month, and they were typically a couple of hours with a break in the middle. And there were a few ingredients that we found worked well over the course of the project. So the first one was just staying together in the room and having a discussion as a whole team. We thought we might use breakout rooms more, but actually it was really important for us all to work together as a whole team and hear everyone's perspectives. People had the chance to contribute in the way that was easiest for them, whether that was just speaking out loud, writing something down, raising their hand. And we tried to keep it fun with things like one cat check-ins at the beginning. So you might be familiar with one word check-ins, but all our meetings began with selecting the cat that best represented how we were feeling on that day. And we always took the time to build relationships and talk about things outside of work. For example, every time we finished a meeting, we all shared something we were looking forward to before our next gathering. We also collected lots of feedback throughout the process from our co-designers. So at every stage, we were asking them to tell us about their experiences in a few words, give us loads of feedback and suggestions on what we could be doing better. We asked questions on psychological safety, adapted from Amy C. Edmondson's book on psychological safety in teams. And they were also really useful for practicalities like gathering people's availability for dates and things like that. We had a series of tasks to work through, and the first big one was to look at all the innovations that expressed interest in the accelerator and whittle those down to a shortlist. So we weren't entirely sure how many expressions of interest we would get, and we decided it made more sense for us internally at Humanly to come up with a broad proposed approach and take this to the team for feedback, discussion, and refinement. And that was a theme throughout the whole co-design process, always weighing up what's the best use of everyone's time. So we took the approach to the team. Everyone was happy with the broad approach. We managed to tweak that a bit together, and then we split into pairs, including one person with lived experience and one member of the Humanly or Asthma Lung UK team to review a set of expressions of interest. And that allowed each team to be really flexible. So, for example, Ali met up with her co-designer in person, and they sort of printed off theirs and went through them together. Other teams looked through them independently and then came together online to discuss and share thoughts. And it also meant that every application was reviewed equally by people living with lung conditions and professionals. Another thing that was really key throughout this whole first part of the project was sharing power. And not just in this part of the project, but the whole project. We really wanted to make sure that people with lived experience were not just being consulted or involved in the process, but that they actually had an equal seat at the table. So, for example, at the product selection stage, we actually co-designed the criteria we'd use to make a decision about what products to take forward. We co-interviewed each innovator, and we had equal representation from each perspective on the team. And we equally voted on which products we thought we should take into testing. And yeah, we were really happy with the outcomes of this process. We double checked, triple checked, quadruple checked that we had really shared power effectively and that we weren't skewing the results as people with previous experience of research and innovation. So we selected two products to take into testing, and the first one was Breathmin, which is an app that supports people through a tailored program of exercises. They do those using their mobile phone, but the whole program that they work through is assigned by a physiotherapist who they speak to right at the beginning. And then as they complete their exercises, AI actually captures their movements and is able to analyze how well they're performing their exercises. So they get real-time feedback and feedback from their physiotherapist on how to improve their technique. The second product that we took into testing was BreathTech. BreathTech is an online program that uses CBT approaches to support people to manage their breathlessness and to think differently about physical activity and the mental health issues associated with breathlessness. So it's a course that people work through, covering different topics and providing people with lots of activities, techniques, tips, tools that they can go off and implement as they try to increase their physical activity. We also worked together to identify the key criteria that we would use to evaluate these products. And it was really interesting to get together as a team and actually talk about what good looks like from the perspective of being a human-centered designer, or from the perspective of actually living with a lung condition and being the target audience for these products. And of course, Asthma Lung UK brought a unique perspective with their expertise in respiratory research and innovation and knowledge of everything that's already out there and what's worked and what hasn't worked in the past. So together we came up with these 8 criteria that we used as part of the analysis. And just one example was a criteria that one of our co-designers came up with, and we felt this really summed up everything, which was, is it worth it? So yeah, this product wants to help me, but are the benefits I'm experiencing actually worth the effort that I need to put in and to incorporate this into my life? And that was a really interesting way of summing it up, and something that we took into the whole rest of the project. We also recruited 31 people with lung conditions to test the products. So beyond our co-designers, we had a really diverse range of people with lung conditions. And we made sure that our recruitment focused on reaching those most at risk of poor respiratory outcomes, and those who are traditionally underrepresented in research, particularly research around respiratory conditions and managing those conditions. So this included a focus on people from minority ethnic backgrounds, lower socioeconomic groups, people living with multiple long-term health conditions, and so on. And we did incentivize people to test the products over 8 weeks. We wanted to recognize all the time and effort they were having to put in, but we really wanted to replicate real world usage as much as possible. And we asked participants just to use the products in the most natural way possible, pretend they weren't part of this research study, that they'd just been told, give this a go. And if they didn't get on with it and they wanted to give up, then just to do that, because that's actually the most valuable thing for us to learn. And we emphasized the whole way through that we wanted really honest feedback, brutally honest feedback, even negative, and that if for any reason they just didn't want to use the product, they could still take part in the research, and we would find other ways for them to contribute to the study, and that they wouldn't lose out on the incentive. And I think that really helped us to get, well, as you can see in this quote here, we did get the brutally honest feedback that we were hoping for. This participant compared one of the apps to being in a booth getting your passport photo taken and telling you to move your head here, move your head there, and said it wasn't how he wanted to spend his evening. But this is how we actually managed to improve the products. And in fact, that product was improved even within the lifespan of the study. So the main way that we captured people's feedback was using a mobile ethnography tool. So we had 8 weeks of testing and participants capturing how they were getting on with the products through videos, narrated screen recordings, photos, and really sharing as much as possible about their day-to-day lives and everything good and bad that they were experiencing with the products. We also conducted in-depth interviews with participants at the beginning and the end to explore their experiences in more detail. So those were 60 interviews in total. And alongside the interviews and the mobile ethnography, we also had access to data provided by the products. So we could compare what people were reporting with their actual usage. And we were also able to identify trends from the usage data across the cohort. So in terms of what came out of this process, we had over 1,300 uploads to the mobile ethnography platform. That included over 900 videos and screen recordings, and that totaled at over 58 hours of footage. So a lot of data, all of which was analysed manually by the Humanly team. But it was really worth it. And we think we generated really, really valuable and nuanced insights from this process. And I'll hand over to Ali to tell you a bit more about that.
Great, thanks, Jenny. As Jenny was just saying, we got some really rich and nuanced insights from this process, which were really helpful to the product teams that we were working with. So here's an example of a quote from one of the product owners that usability testing is amazing. The way you think and what people actually do is a different world. And we've got an example to share with you now. So one of our participants, we noticed during the process that she was using the app exactly as it was intended. She was using it every day and seemed to be making great progress. She seemed to be, reporting that she was feeling well, and we'll play a little video of her kind of in the middle of the process of testing it.
Hi, so I've just got back to my car after completing walk around the lake. Really pleased with myself. It's nearly 2 miles. I've not stopped once and I've not even used my inhaler once. When I start getting breathless, I just practiced my breathing techniques off of the breathing app, and I've managed all the way around. And I've just looked at my steps. There was at just over 1,000, and now I'm at 3,754. So I'm pleased.
So as you can hear, she seemed really pleased with herself, really happy with how far she was able to walk and not using her inhaler as much. However, at the end of the testing period, when we asked her whether she thought that the app had any impact on her, she said that she didn't. She didn't think it had any impact on her. And the reason that she said that was that what with them asking before you start how you felt and after how you felt, I thought it should be making a difference. I never felt no difference. If I struggled with them, I sometimes felt worse. I never felt better. So she was talking about the actual exercise routines that she'd been prescribed by her physiotherapist. As you can see on the slide, these are questions that are asked at the end of each physio session. Which are, how are you feeling now? How intense was today's session? And do you feel any different after the session? And for this participant, she interpreted that as meaning that she should be feeling better directly after the session, which was not the intention. But understandably, these questionnaires made her think that. And from the product co-founder, they said that this insight around the pre and post exercise survey were the most unexpected learning for them. And he said, I would never have thought of this, but it makes sense when you put it this way. So it's something that we would never have learned without sort of seeing this participant using the product for all this time and understanding that how they interpreted what was happening and what to do was very different from the product developer's intention. We also got to see the context of people's broader lives. So we got to see people going out for walks. We'll share a little video of one of our participants out for a lovely walk on a lovely day.
Hello, I thought I would just do a little video of walking in the sunny South Wales valleys this afternoon. It's very, very warm, which I'm not complaining, but it's unexpected because the weather's been quite not that nice over the last week.
And these gave us a real insight into people's everyday lives, both the positive and the negative, and how products had to fit into their lives, and where there weren't challenges. And it also helped us to see over time. So you can see here with this beautiful photograph, there's a quote from one participant saying that her day-to-day life is like night and day. This photo sums up my journey with BreathTech. This is the hill I walked up without stopping and gasping for air. Only a few weeks ago, I used to dread walking up this hill. And in the first video she ever uploaded onto the platform, she actually walked up this hill and was very, very breathless and was explaining that's how she had to get to her car, was walking up this hill. So it was amazing to see the kind of progress people made and have them share such rich insights. It was also a really helpful approach to be able to challenge assumptions that we had made about products. So both us and the product team from Breathment thought that the initial setting up of the phone might be a challenge for people using the app because it has to be at a certain angle and a certain distance away from people for the AI to work properly and be able to pick people up. However, what we learned was that actually people were really creative, and the vast majority of people were able to set up the phone and just used creative approaches to this. We've included some images of our favourites. There's a really sort of traditional people using actually their child's tripod for the phone. We've got a stool and a blue towel combination as a tripod with the phone balanced on top. And somebody was even able to set it up in hospital. And we've got a little video of somebody who also talks us through their setup.
Yeah, it wasn't difficult finding a chair to use for the exercises or positioning. I had ample room in my dining room area. And didn't find it too difficult to set up, as I've said already, I think, in one of the other videos. The phone situation is a little bit more of a task, as that's where I actually have to balance it.
That was a particular favourite, a sort of shoebox, makeup bag and shopping bag combination. But people are creative and find ways to do it. It was not really a barrier. So as Jenny said, the Humanly team analysed all of the raw data and then we presented a selection of the data to the co-designers over 3 workshops. So this enabled insights to be refined and missed insights to be identified or added to by the team, as well as checking that everything resonated with the co-designers. So to start with, we had a midway learning session. This was after 4 weeks of user testing, so enabled us to check in with the co-designers before we'd finished the research, and we had a really good amount of time left. So we focused on the big picture insights here rather than the minor, easily fixed usability issues. And we looked at the emerging findings. So we checked whether these were resonating with people and whether we were interpreting things correctly. But we also got suggestions for anything that we were missing or weren't currently collecting so that we could make sure that we were putting that into the research in the second half and gathering the data that the co-designers wanted to hear. The second step was looking at the findings at the end of the 8-week testing. This was very much about interpreting the big findings. So how did the results compare to the product evaluation criteria that was co-designed at the start of the process? So for our testing, we found that for one of those criteria, the is it worth it criteria, that actually whether a product is worth the effort or not was very much dependent on the impact that the health condition had on the individual. So for people who had a condition that had a really high impact on their daily life, their threshold for the amount of effort that they needed to put into a product was much, much higher than for people whose health condition had a very minimal impact on their daily life. They obviously had a much lower threshold for the amount of effort they wanted to be putting into a product that might help them with their health condition if their health condition wasn't currently having a big impact on their life. The third step was discussing opportunities for new features and coming up with new ideas. So following the insight refinement, the co-design team worked together to develop recommendations for the product teams. So, for example, we had learnt that it was a real challenge for breathment to keep people engaged before they started seeing the positive impacts of using it, which was normally sort of 3 to 4 weeks into using it. So this challenge was presented to the co-designers along with evidence of how that sort of challenge presented. And the team brainstormed ideas for how we could solve this problem. So here's an example of how the co-designers fed into the report. So one of the ideas that the co-designers came up with around the challenge with keeping people engaged with breathment before they saw a positive impact on their own health was the team discussed how having some sort of way of showing progress, like a progress bar, or making the invisible progress visible to users could help people engaged. This was then put into the report by sharing examples of other products that use this technique. So, for example, smoking cessation apps, where it tells you the positive impact that quitting smoking has on your body before you start to feel it, or pregnancy trackers, where it tells you what's happening inside your body and gives you kind of visual things that you can compare it to. So these were ideas that were then put into the report and delivered to the breathment team. And then in terms of outputs from this process, the mobile ethnography approach generated rich and nuanced insights into people's real life experiences of managing their conditions and using the products. It uncovered findings that are difficult to come across through other types of research. So what we were able to deliver was insights into who the products were best suited for, who they worked best for, why people liked using them. So did they provide motivation? Did they provide reassurance or personalized guidance? The actual usage, so we had access to the back end of these products as well. So we weren't just looking at self-reported usage, we were looking at actual usage of the products from the back end. We were able to analyze how users had used the products and dropped off and at what point. So we had drop-off data. We were able to provide user journeys that showed how people's experience changed across the 8 weeks. So from that very beginning of starting to use the app to seeing positive impacts towards the end and how people's lives had been impacted. And we were also able to provide really rich evidence to back up all of these different elements that were in the reports that were delivered to the product teams. So humanly drafted reports for the 2 products teams, and we shared these with the whole co-design team for feedback before they were finalised. We asked the co-designers to flag if anything didn't make sense or sound right based on what they'd heard during the co-analysis sessions. And we received some really good feedback, but also some great suggestions to add nuance to how the insights were presented, and even new ideas that were included in the draft, in the reports that we then delivered. These resulted in an additional round of edits to include the suggestions that had been made before the reports were presented to the product teams. So we've learnt an awful lot through this project, too much to share in just one talk, but there are a few reflections on things we've learnt along the way. So in terms of time, we learnt that time will always fly by. We only asked for approximately 1 day a month from the co-designers, and we learnt to use this really wisely. A non-negotiable for us was always making time for care and relationships. So that meant, for example, not skipping breaks in meetings, even when we had a lot to discuss, and always making sure that conversations about how everyone was and what everyone was up to outside of the project were also included in our meetings. We also tried to keep our focus on achievements, achieving our objectives rather than kind of ticking off activities in a plan. We sometimes ran out of time to do everything in a session plan, and that's fine as long as we are making progress towards our goal. And lastly, we learned to check with co-designers what they wanted to be spending their time on rather than making assumptions. So, for example, we had a conversation about how much filtering we should do at Humanly regarding the applications to the accelerator. So, if there was a product that was clearly not going to meet the minimum eligibility requirements, did people still, the co-designers still want to see those applications? And they made a decision that actually they'd rather not spend their time doing that, and they'd rather focus their time on the applications that met the basic eligibility requirements. We also needed to prioritise the team's time when it came to shared decision makings. So in some cases, we took a blank canvas approach. For example, when approaching what good looked like and how we should evaluate the products. At other times, we drafted a proposed approach and then took it to the team for discussion and feedback. Overall, we felt that the most important thing was to always stop and sense check our thinking, pause and reflect before going ahead. And then in terms of flexibility, it was really important to have diverse ways of working and collaborating, not just meetings. So being flexible and adaptable, but without shifting the goalposts all the time. See, for example, at the start of the process, we provided co-designers with a list of the meeting dates for the whole process. And we tried as far as possible never to move those. We moved one once because basically everybody was on holiday, but other than that we were able to stick to them, and people really appreciated that, having them planned out and in their diaries well in advance. And then another thing we learned was that at the start of this project, we didn't know whether 8 weeks was the appropriate length of time to be testing these products. It's a very long time to test products in this way. Similar kind of studies might last for 4 to 6 weeks more commonly. However, what we learnt was if we had only tested these for 4 to 6 weeks, we would have missed some really, really important insights. So as you can see from these user journeys, we saw a lot of the impact towards the end of that time period. So for breath tech, it was designed as a course that should last around 6 weeks. So if we had only like 4 weeks, or even if we'd had 6 weeks, by the time we'd got people up and running, we would have had to hurry people through that course, which would risk impacting their experience and their engagement. It wouldn't be a very real world representation of their experience. And also, there are times where things needed to change, especially for people with respiratory conditions. People were often in hospital or were too unwell to be able to engage with the apps for a period of time. So having that extra time was really important. But it also takes a long time for people to see a change in their condition with respiratory conditions. So as you can see with breath mint, the user journey was sort of quite steady to start with. They weren't seeing a lot of impact. And then after about 4 weeks, we started noticing impact for this particular participant by what they were reporting, but they weren't noticing it themselves. Only in those final kind of 4 weeks did they start to recognize that impact in themselves and be able to identify it. So in conclusion, we think, yes, 8 weeks is actually a really important feature of this testing, and we would definitely do 8 weeks testing again in the future. And I'm just going to pass over to Jenni now to talk through how this has added value.
Great. So in terms of the impact and value that we hope to have, obviously Ali shared a bit of the impact that the project had on the products that we tested, but we're hoping to have wider impact as well. And we really hope to be part of a bigger movement across the health sector, the health tech sector, which is part of why we are here today sharing this work. We really want to see these types of approaches, so co-design and user-centered testing, used more widely. And we believe that these sorts of processes are better and they will develop products that actually marry usability and desirability with clinical efficacy. And we believe that better insights into user experiences in these sorts of real world contexts provide a really different perspective on how people use products in the context of their everyday lives, goals, and challenges, not just clinical trials, which are quite sanitized and removed from people's daily lives. And as you can imagine, as human-centered designers, we believe that these types of processes and these types of insights do create better products, products that people actually want to use and do use in real life. And also that they work for people with really diverse backgrounds and experiences with clinical trials and any kind of voluntary testing. You're only usually getting the perspective of quite a small slice of the population. And we really wanted to extend that opportunity to people who are not usually part of those types of trials and testing processes. And the ultimate goal is, of course, better outcomes for all people with lung conditions. And that could apply to any health condition that is tackled by technology. Another way that we are trying to be part of a bigger movement is by making a lot of effort to capture and share the learning of this work. We do believe it was quite innovative, so we want to make sure none of that great learning is lost. And that's why we've commissioned an independent evaluation of the programme, which is currently underway to maximise the learning and impact. One of our co-designers, who has a lung condition himself, is making a short film documenting the project and what we did in both the co-design and the user-centered approach to product testing. And we've been doing the rounds of conferences and events, just like this one, to present the work and invite people to join the conversation. For example, we recently presented at Service Design in Government alongside one of our co-designers living with a lung condition. And that was really important to us as much as possible to make sure we are still involving co-designers in the sharing of this work. We're also exploring the potential for publishing a paper about the methodology, so watch this space, and hopefully that's something else we'll be able to do so that others can learn and replicate what we've done in this project. But if you'd like to know more in the meantime, it might take us a while to get a paper written and published, but we have been writing more informally in a series of blog posts, including reflections from each stage of the journey, what worked well, what we might do differently. So yeah, do check out our blog via the QR code or the link shown here, and do get in touch as well. We love to hear from people. We love to hear of others who are tackling similar challenges or trying out these types of approaches. It's not easy, and there's lots we can learn from one another. So please do reach out as well. But thank you for listening, and we'll be very happy to answer any questions that you have. Thanks for coming.
Thanks very much.